What would you do if you had only one piece of bread, but saw 3 hungry children in front of you? This is the story of a man who chose to give, even when he had nothing left to lose. In a small village nestled between green hills and flowing rivers, there lived a shepherd named Rajan. He was not a wealthy man. In fact, he was one of the poorest people in the entire village. His clothes were torn and patched many times over. His shoes had holes that let the rain soak through to his feet, and his small hut at the edge of the village barely kept the wind out during cold nights. But Rajan had something that money could never buy. He had a heart filled with compassion and generosity that knew no limit. Every morning, Rajan would wake up before dawn and take his small flock of goats to graze in the meadows. The flock was small, just 7 goats. Most shepherds in the village had 20, 30, sometimes even 50 goats. But Rajan was content with his 7. He would sit under the shade of a large banyan tree, watching his goats eat grass, and he would smile. The villagers thought he was simple-minded. Some even called him foolish behind his back. That Rajan, they would say, shaking their heads. He could have more if he worked harder, but he just sits there, smiling like he owns the world. What they didn't understand was that Rajan didn't measure wealth the way they did. One afternoon, as Rajan was returning home with his goats, he saw an old woman sitting by the roadside. She was thin, her face wrinkled with age and hardship. She looked weak, as if she hadn't eaten in days. Rajan stopped. "Grandmother," he said gently, "are you all right?" The old woman looked up at him with tired eyes. "I'm hungry, son. I've been walking for 2 days trying to reach the next village, but I don't think I can make it anymore." Without hesitation, Rajan reached into his bag. He had brought 1 roti and a small piece of jaggery for his own lunch. It was all he had, but he handed it to the old woman immediately. "Please, eat this," he said with a warm smile. The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "But what about you, son? You need to eat too." Rajan waved his hand dismissively. "Don't worry about me, grandmother. I can eat when I get home. You need this more than I do. You need this more than I do." The old woman ate the food gratefully, tears streaming down her face. When she finished, she looked at Rajan with deep emotion in her eyes. "You have a pure heart, young man. May God bless you with abundance." Rajan simply smiled and continued on his way home, his stomach empty but his heart full. This was not an isolated incident. Rajan gave away things constantly. A few days later, a young boy came to him crying. The boy's mother was sick, and they needed money to buy medicine. Rajan immediately sold one of his goats and gave all the money to the boy. "But sir," the boy protested, "this is too much. I only need half of this." Rajan shook his head. "Take it all. Buy the medicine and get some good food for your mother. She needs strength to recover." The villagers heard about this and were shocked. "He sold his goat?" they whispered among themselves. "He barely has enough goats as it is. What kind of fool does such a thing?" But Rajan didn't care what people said. A week later, a family's house caught fire in the village. They lost everything. The father of the family stood in front of the ashes of his home, not knowing what to do. Rajan heard about it and immediately went to his own small hut. He gathered all the extra clothes he had, a blanket, some cooking pots, and a small bag of rice. He brought everything to the family. "Please, take these," Rajan said. "I know it's not much, but it might help you get started again." The man looked at the items, and then at Rajan's own torn clothes and humble appearance. "Brother, you need these things yourself. You're as poor as we are now." Rajan smiled. "I have enough. You have nothing right now. Please, don't refuse." The man broke down in tears and hugged Rajan tightly. But the village judgment grew harsher. "Rajan has lost his mind," people said openly now. "He's giving away everything he owns. At this rate, he'll have nothing left and will starve to death." Some villagers tried to talk sense into him. One evening, the village elder, a wealthy man named Mahendra, called Rajan to his house. "Rajan," Mahendra said in a serious tone, "I've been hearing about your activities. You're giving away your possessions left and right. This is foolishness. You need to think about your own future. What will happen when you're old and have nothing? Rajan listened respectfully, then replied calmly, Sir, I understand your concern, but I can't see someone suffering and do nothing when I have something to give, even if it's little. It might make a big difference to them. Mahendra sighed in frustration. But you're making yourself poor. How is that wise? Rajan smiled gently. Perhaps I'm poor in possessions, sir, but I feel rich in every other way. Mahendra dismissed him with a wave of his hand, convinced that Rajan was beyond help. As months passed, Rajan's generosity continued unabated. He now had only 3 goats left. He had given away most of his clothes, his cooking utensils, and nearly all his food supplies. The villagers stopped talking to him. They thought he was cursed or crazy. Children were told to stay away from the mad shepherd. One cold winter evening, Rajan was returning home when he saw a young couple with a baby sitting under a tree. They were shivering in the cold. The baby was crying, wrapped in nothing but a thin cloth. Rajan's heart broke at the sight. He immediately took off his shawl, the only warm thing he owned, and wrapped it around the baby. Then he took off his own torn but warm jacket and gave it to the mother. Please, he said, take these. Your baby needs warmth. The father looked at Rajan stunned. But sir, you'll freeze without these. Rajan shook his head. I'll manage. I have a hut to go to. You're sleeping outside. You need them more. The couple cried and thanked him profusely as Rajan walked away into the cold night, his arms wrapped around himself to keep warm. When he reached his hut, he realized he had no firewood left and no money to buy any. He lay down on his thin mat, shivering through the night, but somehow he still smiled. At least that baby is warm, he thought to himself. The next morning Rajan woke up sick. He had caught a fever from the cold, but he still took his 3 remaining goats out to graze. As he sat under the banyan tree, coughing and shivering, a merchant passed by with his cart. The merchant stopped when he saw Rajan's condition. You look terrible, the merchant said. You should be home resting. Rajan smiled weakly. The goats need to eat. The merchant studied him for a moment, then said, I've heard about you. You're the one who gives everything away. People say you're a fool. Rajan nodded slowly. Yes, they say that. And what do you say? The merchant asked curiously. Rajan thought for a moment, then replied, I say that when I give something away, I feel a happiness that no amount of possessions has ever given me. So, perhaps I'm a fool. But, I'm a happy fool. The merchant looked at him thoughtfully, then nodded and continued on his journey. That night, Rajan's fever worsened. He could barely move. He had no food in his hut and no strength to go get any. He lay on his mat, weak and alone. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. Maybe they were right, he thought. Maybe I was foolish. I gave everything away, and now I have nothing. I'm sick and alone, and no one cares. But even in his darkest moment, Rajan couldn't bring himself to regret his choices. Every face he had helped flashed before his eyes. The old woman eating his food. The boy's mother, who recovered from illness. The family who rebuilt their life. The baby wrapped warmly in his shawl. No, he whispered to himself. I did the right thing. Even if I die here tonight, I did the right thing. Just then, there was a knock on his door. Rajan struggled to sit up. Who is it? He called out weakly. The door opened, and the young couple he had helped days ago stood there, holding a pot of hot soup and some blankets. We heard you were sick, the woman said with concern. We couldn't just leave you like this. You saved our baby's life. They helped Rajan eat the soup and wrapped him in warm blankets. The warmth and nourishment began to revive him. Thank you, Rajan said with tears in his eyes. Thank you so much. But that wasn't all. Over the next few days, something remarkable happened. The old woman Rajan had fed came back with food. The boy whose mother he had helped brought medicine. The family whose house had burned down came to repair Rajan's leaking roof. One by one, every person Rajan had helped came forward to help him in his time of need. The villagers watched in amazement. Look at that, they whispered. All those people are helping the mad shepherd. Mahendra, the village elder, watched this with a thoughtful expression. Within a week, Rajan had recovered completely. His hut had been repaired. He had food, warm clothes, and even firewood stacked outside his door. But the biggest surprise came one morning when there was a loud knock on his door. Rajan opened it to find a well-dressed elderly man standing there with several servants carrying bags and boxes. "Are you Rajan the shepherd?" the man asked. "Yes, sir," Rajan replied, confused. The elderly man's eyes filled with tears. "I've been looking for you for months. Do you remember helping an old woman on the road several months ago? You gave her your only food?" Rajan nodded slowly. "Yes, I remember. That was my mother," the man said, his voice breaking with emotion. "She was trying to reach my house, but she had gotten lost. She was on the verge of collapse when you helped her. Your kindness saved her life. When she finally reached me and told me about you, I knew I had to find you and thank you properly." The man gestured to his servants, who brought forward the bags and boxes. "I am a wealthy merchant from the city," he continued. "I want to repay your kindness. Please accept these gifts." Rajan looked at the offerings, stunned. There was money, clothes, food, and even a deed to a small piece of land with a proper house on it. "Sir, this is too much," Rajan protested. "I didn't help your mother expecting anything in return." The merchant smiled. "I know you didn't. That's exactly why you deserve this. Please, accept it. You've lived in poverty long enough. Let me help you the way you helped my mother." Tears streamed down Rajan's face as he accepted the gifts. But the surprises weren't over. News of the merchant's generosity spread through the village. Other people whom Rajan had helped in the past, but who had never properly thanked him, came forward. A farmer gave him 5 healthy goats to rebuild his flock. A craftsman made him a beautiful new set of clothes. A woman brought him fresh food every day for a month. Even Mahendra, the village elder, came to Rajan with an apology. "I was wrong about you," Mahendra admitted humbly. "I called you a fool, but you are wiser than all of us. You understood something we didn't. You knew that what you give with love always comes back multiplied." Rajan smiled warmly. "I didn't give expecting anything back, sir. I gave because it felt right." "And that's exactly why everything came back to you," Mahendra replied. Within months, Rajan's life had completely transformed. He now lived in a comfortable house with a large flock of goats. He had enough food, clothes, and all the necessities of life. But the most remarkable thing was that Rajan didn't change who he was. He continued to give generously to those in need. The difference now was that he had more to give, and he gave even more joyfully than before. The village that once mocked him now respected him deeply. Parents told their children stories about the generous shepherd. People came to him for advice and blessings. One day, a young boy came to Rajan with a question. "Uncle Rajan," the boy asked, "people say you were once very poor because you gave everything away. Weren't you ever afraid?" Rajan smiled and knelt down to the boy's level. "I was afraid sometimes," he admitted honestly, "but I learned something important. When you give with a pure heart, the universe takes care of you. Not always immediately, and not always in ways you expect, but it always does." The boy thought about this, then asked, "So should I give away all my toys?" Rajan laughed. "No, child. You should give when your heart tells you to, and only what you can truly spare. The key is not how much you give, but the love with which you give it." The boy nodded, understanding, and ran off to play. As Rajan watched him go, he thought back to his journey. He had gone from poverty to wealth, not through cleverness or greed, but through generosity and compassion. He looked up at the sky and whispered a prayer of gratitude. "Thank you for teaching me that true wealth isn't in what we keep, but in what we give away." Years passed and Rajan grew old. He continued to live simply despite his wealth, always finding ways to help others. When he finally passed away peacefully in his sleep, the entire village mourned. Thousands of people came to his funeral, people whose lives he had touched over the years. At his funeral, Mahendra stood up to speak. "Rajan taught us the greatest lesson of all," he said to the gathered crowd. He taught us that generosity is never foolish. He taught us that compassion is the highest form of wisdom. And he taught us that what we give with love always returns to us, often in ways we never imagined. He was the richest man in this village, Mahendra continued, not because of his possessions, but because of the love he gave and received. The crowd nodded in agreement, many with tears in their eyes. And so the story of the generous shepherd lived on, passed down from generation to generation, inspiring countless others to open their hearts and give freely. Because in the end, Rajan proved that true wealth is measured not by what we accumulate, but by what we share, and that a life lived in service to others is the richest life of all. Remember, dear viewer, that every act of kindness, no matter how small, creates ripples that spread far and wide. You never know whose life you might change with a simple act of generosity. The question is not whether you have enough to give. The question is whether you have enough love in your heart to share what you have. Be like Rajan, give with a pure heart, and watch as the universe gives back to you in the most unexpected and beautiful ways. Thank you for watching this story. If it touched your heart, please share it with others so they too can learn the lesson of the generous shepherd.